Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this very small black powder battle report in 28mm. So this is our battlefield today. It is sometime in the year 1812. The French are pushing into Russia, and as they have crossed the river here at this village, the Russian forces have come to try and stall the advance of the French. So we have this section of the battlefield, as you see, cordoned off by a river, which is fordable, and then the road branching off in either direction, with the fields up in the corner here, and the forces deployed, as you see. I'll start with the Russians. So up here we've got a small brigade of 3 units. We have a unit of musketeers already deployed into line, a unit of musketeers in attack column, and behind them in, well, I think it's divisional mass or company battalion mass for Russians and Austrians, and behind them then we have the Pavlov Grenadiers. So they're coming down the road, and then deployed in the field. Sorry, the camera dropped there. And then deployed in the fields we have the Russian Dragoons with a supporting wing or element of a battalion of Jaegers deployed in the line, some skirmishing Jaegers, and a battery of artillery that is currently limbered, hence why it's facing that direction. Then over on this side of the battlefield facing them, we have Marshal Ney, the level 9 commander. In front of him some Voltigeurs, his Lancers, and then he is supported by a battalion of Bavarians, in front of whom is a battalion of French. Then on the hill here we have French artillery already deployed, as they've been here before, so they're bearing down on the Russians on this hilltop. And then still coming through the village in attack column are 2 more battalions of French line with their commander ushering them over. So it's going to be a very short battle report. We're going to do 6 turns. The objective for the French is to hold. The objective for the Russians is to try and push the French off. So it will be how many units are shaken at the end of the field. So, as I say, 6 turns. So we're going to roll off for turn 1. Yellow dice Russians, blue dice are the French. And it is going to be French turn 1. Alright, in a turn 1 for the French, and as you can see, the battalion in the village, first order of the game was a blunder, and it was the battalion in front was ordered to move forward. They rolled a 1 then on the blunder table, and so had to move back to here, where they are now just milling around in the built up area, having not crossed the river, so perhaps the Russians will seize the initiative. Over here, certain things happened, certain things didn't. The French battalion moved forward. The Bavarians then, seeing the French sort of blunder on the far side, moved up in support in this direction. The Marshal Ney then pushed the skirmishers up to the hedgerow and field the order with his cavalry. So they're being held in reserve for now. So some positions being taken. So the only thing to do now in the French turn is some shooting over onto the Russians over here. So that battalion is in range. And what I have started to do with my artillery, on the recommendation of someone who commented on the channel, is to just add an extra dice, because 1 dice does feel a little bit pathetic, especially when this is supposed to represent a battery of artillery. So they will have 2 dice. It is long range, so they're hitting on 5s, and they both miss. So the French have achieved very little in turn 1, but they are on the defense, so it will be up to the Russians now to seize the initiative and push forward. So let's go on to the Russians turn 1. Okay, so a mixed bag for the Russians as well. On this side, this brigade, they only try to order the artillery up onto this raised area hill, which is just a slight hill, to unlimber. Failed. Then rather than using the reroll, moved on to this unit to try and move up as well. I should say as well that if a brigade commander in smaller games fails a roll, I just move them on to another unit unless he's ordered a brigade order, because it just makes the game too quick. So Jaegers also failed to move. This Jaeger tried to move right up to the hedgerow, but only got one successful order, so have just moved up. They're just outside of musket range as well. And the same thing with the dragoons. Tried to move them to the other side of the hedge. They only got far enough to move up to the hedge, as the hedge will hinder their movement over it. This brigade was a lot more successful. This battalion of Russians got 3 moves off and are now ready to trade some fire on the Bavarians. And these 2 battalions both managed to march up, and hopefully we'll be able to take a nice defensive position, stop the French from pushing through the ford, taking advantage of the blunder that has happened here. But as for shooting, it is only going to be this battalion against the Bavarians. Now the Russians are known as terrible shots, so even though they're within range, they still will be hitting on 5s. So we're looking 3 dice, 5s or less. And there is a 6, so that is a disorder and another hit. So 2 hits and a disorder. Alright, Bavarians are now disordered. They're taking 2 saves on 4 pluses. Failed 1, saved 1. So they are taking a casualty and are disordered. So those Russian muskets proving effective for their first volley. But that is it for Russian turn 1. They have 5 more turns in which to try and push the French off the field. Let's see what the French can do in their turn 2. Okay, so here we are for French turn 2, and as you can see, this brigade over here has managed to turn the table. So the unit that blundered in attack column has moved up onto the ford, still in attack column as there's room for them, and the unit that were in front of them managed to get their moves off and form a line now just in front of those Russians. So they are being supported by the battalion behind them. The Bavarians, still disordered, are just staying exactly where they are. French weren't able to get this battalion up as far as they would like. However, the Voltigeurs managed to get up into a fine position, and the cavalry spurred forward and are now looking down greedily at that still limbered artillery battery there. So the Russians might be needing to get those guys sort of into a better position. But we're on to some French shooting, so we'll start over here. This battalion is now deployed. 3 shots into this attack column of Russians, so hitting on 4s. And that is 1 hit, so the Russians will save that on a 4. And they do save it, so no damage caused there. Over here, the Bavarians, who are disordered, will return fire, so they will hit on 5s, being disordered. But they get 2 6s, so that is going to disorder those Russians. The marksmen from southern Germany unload onto the Russians, disordering them and causing 2 casualties, which will be saved on 4 pluses. No, so those Russians do take 2 casualties as well. 2 casualties in disorder on that brigade, but it's not finished for them yet because they are in range of the artillery. Within medium range now is going to be 3 dice, and because of medium range, it's going to be hitting on 4s. And that is 2 hits with the artillery as well. The Russians, because it is artillery, will be saving this on 5s. And they don't manage to save either, so those Russians are now shaken on their stamina of 4. So, pushing forward and disordering those Bavarians may not have been worth it. So they will have to take a break test, having been shaken by artillery fire. But moving on over here, the Voltigeurs will take 2 shots in against the Jaegers, and I will just double check that they are within range. 12 inches, they are. So that is 2 shots against those Jaegers. And there's the disorder, and they do get to reroll 1 because they are sharpshooters. So 2 hits and a disordering shot on them as well. Voltigeurs doing what they are trained to do, taking out commanders, causing disorder and panic within the ranks. 2 saves for the Russians of a 4. Both saved, however, but a disorder placed there nonetheless. And that is it for French shooting. So, a break test now for the Russians. And that is an 11. They are fine. They are holding their ground. They are shaken, however, so it will take some doing to get them sort of moving and back into the field. But that is the end of French turn 2. Let us move on now to Russian turn 2. And a turn to orders for the Russians, and we have a combat. Have yet to do the closing fire, but this regiment of Moscow musketeers have had enough, and they have charged into the French, blocking the French advance and hoping that the Pavlovs behind them will bring up enough support to be able to push through that line. Then the brigade commander managed to successfully rally off a casualty on this unit. They're still disordered for this turn, however, but they are no longer shaken, which means they may still have a chance to get back to the fight. Over here, absolutely abysmal. The only order that was successful was one move forward for the limbered artillery. They're in a very bad position, considering that there's no French cavalry directly in front of them. But we will see what can happen. And unfortunately, because these Jaegers didn't move and these Jaegers are disordered, the only shooting on this side is going to be Jaegers against Voltigeurs. Now, they are disordered, they're behind hard cover, and they're shooting at skirmishers, so it is going to be 6s to hit. But because they're Jaegers and sharpshooters, they do get to reroll one of these dice. There's a 6, and they get to reroll one. 2 hits, look at that. The Jaegers from Russia, filled with anger that the French have dared to attack their Holy Land, causing disorder, and 4s to save. 3s to save, sorry, because they're behind the wall. But 1 casualty into the Voltigeurs. So, not all bad from the Russians. Over here, this battalion is going to shoot. They are disordered, so it will be 6s to hit against the Bavarians. And that is all misses, so the Bavarians are safe for another turn. And then over here we are going to have the combat, but before that we need to do the French closing fire. 3 shots hitting on 3s. And there's 3 hits, and it is a disorder, so the Russians going in do get disordered. And have now to save these on 4s. 3s actually, because they are in their attack column. So 3s to save. They fail 1, so they take a casualty on the way in. French musketry doing stellar work there. But we'll move on now to the combat. Okay, so here we are into combat. The Russians having been disordered and taken a casualty run through. They have 6 dice that would normally be hitting on 3s because they've charged, but now they've been disordered, they're hitting on 4s. They are tough fighters, however, so they do get to reroll 1 miss. Hitting on 4s. So that is only 2 hits so far. They do get to reroll 1, and it does become a hit, so 3 hits. The French are exactly the same. They are hitting on 4s. And they're only 2 hits for the French, so the Russians need 2 saves of a 3+ because they are in their attack column, or divisional mass, so they managed to pass both their saves. The French saving 3s on 4s, and the French take 2 casualties. So at the end of that, the Russians have caused 2 casualties on the French. Both units are supported to the rear, which means that the Russians have won that combat. So the French are testing. Yep, that's what a 4 is. The unit is breaks and is deemed destroyed. So that French line battalion, charged by the Russians, could not stand against their ferocity and broke and scattered into the far winds. And a rule that I have not noticed until now is that in actual fact, you have to test for supporting units if the supported unit, i.e. the unit that has just broken, has fled. So this unit now has to take a break test. Suddenly it's all gone wrong. The French have just completely abandoned the built-up area here and have gone. So these Russians, whose commander was probably thinking it's going to be your job to hold the French here, push them back across the river. Oh no, they have more than achieved their objective, which means that 2 battalions, one of them Pavlov Grenadiers, are now ready to swing as the noose tightens against the French. That was a very good turn 2 for the Russians. That battalion is disordered, but they have seen off 2 French battalions. Wow. laurels of victory will be going to those men, no doubt, at the end of today's battle. But on we go to French turn 3. Let's see if they can, if Marshal Ney can pull victory from the jaws of impending defeat. So that's the end of turn 3 orders for the French, and they may be able to do something. The Bavarians are holding their ground here. Marshal Ney has just kept them in that position, hoping to lay down more fire onto those Russians, disorder them again, perhaps even just cause enough casualties to keep them shaken, stop their advance. The commander that was over here has fled back to his artillery, as that is all that remains of his brigade, and has ordered them to reform, and now they are in an enfilading position of that Russian column, so maybe they'll be able to cause enough damage on them to halt their advance. Meanwhile, Marshal Ney has pushed his infantry up to the wall so that they are in prime position to fire upon the Jaegers, and as you can see, it's bad news for the Russian artillery. They're still limbered. They have been charged by the Russian Lancers. They will not get any dice in combat, so unless the Lancers completely fluff, it's not looking good for the Russian artillery. But let us now move on to some shooting. So this unit is within half range. They're going to get 3 dice to fire in against that Russian column, and because it is a column, they are going to be hitting it on 3s. And there's a disorder and 3 hits. The Russians, even though they are in attack column, will be saving this on 4s, I believe. I'll double check. So actually medium range with artillery is -2, and you don't get the bonus for being in column, so it's going to be 6s to save this for the Russians. So they don't save any of them, which means that they are now shaken and will have to take a break test at -1. We'll do that at the end. Move over to these Bavarians, shooting in against the Russians. 3 shots, hitting on 4s. And there's 3 hits and a disorder again. That is just exactly what the French needed at this point in time. So again, 3 saves by the Russians. They are saving these on 4s, however. That's the crucial one. So they have been shaken once more, and disordered holds that battalion up for another turn. Over to this French line battalion, firing their 3 shots in against the Jaegers. Again, another disorder. Disorder all over the field here for the Russians. 2 saves for the Jaegers on 4s. No, 2 1s. So 2 casualties there on the Jaegers. Not looking good. French, having seen their flank crumble, are exacting a strong revenge. 2 shots now from the Voltigeurs into the Jaegers as well. They will be hitting on 5s, however, because they are disordered. However, they get to reroll 1 dice because they are sharpshooters, and they miss. So the only other thing to do for the French are the 7 attacks from the cavalry into the limbered artillery, hitting on 3s. And there is 4 1s. So that wasn't good. But the Russians now have to save all of these at -2 because it is Lancers. So there is 2 failed and 1 more is 3 failed. So they've taken 3 casualties. They're going to have to take a break test. Once artillery are contacted, that's it. They are gone. So, reformed over here with the Lancers, which means some initiative moves will be going on for those Jaegers, but a bad position for these Jaegers to be in who are disordered, unless the Russian Dragoons can do something to counter the cavalry now on their flank. Disorder caused here, and the last thing to do in the French turn is this break test over here at -1 because they are disordered. 4s galore. Another battalion wiped off the battlefield. So that is the end of French turn 3. The victorious Russian units, before they could even reform into their ranks, before their colonels and majors could order them to ceased the slaughter and formed back, were completely pummeled by howitzer and 6-pounder shot, and have scattered off to the free winds, leaving the Pavlov Grenadiers in a position perhaps to exact some revenge. This unit has suffered horrendous casualties in the face of superior German musketry, and over here things aren't looking good for the Russians either. They have lost their artillery, they have lancers in their rear, which is never a good place to have a lancer. So can Marshal Ney and his commander, his second in command, can they hold against this Russians? They have inflicted some good casualties. Let's see what the Russians can do in their turn 3. So turn 3 for the Russians, not looking good. Pavlov's failed twice on their order to move, so they are just staring, perhaps in shock and disbelief at the carnage that was wrought in front of them. Not only are 2 French battalions gone, but so are their comrades in arms. So they might need a little bit of time to recuperate, but time is not on their side. The brigade commander did manage to rally off a casualty on this unit. And then over here, initiative move by the Jaegers got them out of the way, away from those lancers, and the dragoons, rolling a 3, managed to reform and move into a position to hopefully halt the French lancers. So moving on to the limited shooting that the Russians have. 3 shots from this unit into the Bavarians. They are disordered, so it will be 6s to hit. And there are 2 6s, so it is a disordered Bavarian battalion who will save on 4s. But they do manage to save it, but they are disordered. Russians being whipped into shape there by their commander, telling them to fire, fire, fire. This unit of Jaegers, who I will tidy up slightly, will now fire down onto this unit of French. So this unit of Jaegers, will fire into this French line battalion. They will be hitting on 4s because they do not suffer from the penalty to hit. So they get 2 6s and a hit as well. The French will save this, however, on 3s, being behind the wall. So the French do take a casualty. So a casualty on that battalion, and disorder too. Lots of disorder flying out here. And that is it for Russian shooting. So no combat. The French have some disorders across the board. Disorders coming off the Russians. Let's see what the French can do now in their turn 4. Hold the fort. The Jaegers are firing in on the lancers. Now they have to draw a straight line. The unit is partially obscured by the dragoons that are running past them, so they're only going to get 1 dice, and they will hit on a 4. And they do hit on a 5, and then they will save that on a 4. So they save it, but worth a shot, you never know. Anyway, on to French, turn 4. Very quick French orders phase. The artillery reforms slightly again just to be in a more prime position to be able to take on either of these targets. They do now have to shoot at this battalion because they are the closest that isn't disordered. So then over here, the only other thing was a charge by the lancers into the dragoons, who counter-charged as well. So, moving on to French shooting. These will do 3 shots. They have to shoot the closest enemy unit to them, which is this battalion here. But they are now hitting on 3s, they're hitting on 4, because these are not in attack column. So there are 2 hits. It is -2 to the Russian save, so they are saving on 6s. Neither of them saved. They're up to 5 casualties. And a chance on a 6 that was the commander. Nope. So they will be taking a break test at -2 now. So let's see what happens there. But they're not finished because the Bavarians are about to pour onto them as well. 3 shots hitting on 5s because the Bavarians are disordered. But there is 3 hits. So 3 more saves of 4+. And 1 failed, which takes them up to 6. So they are definitely taking a break test now at -3. Over to this French battalion firing in against the Jaegers. Again, 3 dice hitting on 5s because they're disordered. Nothing this time. The Jaegers, or the Voltigeurs, 2 shots against the Jaegers too. 1 hit, and they get to re-roll. Just the 1 hit, and a save of the Jaegers of a 4, which they pass. So no damage caused there. So the only other thing now to do is the combat. So now we're in the combat over here. 7 attacks from the Lancers, hitting on 3s against the Dragoons, and no rerolls. So only 3 hits. Not a good start from them. It is 8 attacks from the Dragoons into the Lancers, and they will hit on 3s as well because of countercharge. Yikes, 7 hits. So the Dragoons have to take 3 saves, but they are saving on 5s because of Lancers. So the Dragoons take 2 casualties. Now the French have to take 7 saves of a 4+. And that wasn't bad, 2 casualties each. So the combat does end in a draw with 2 each. However, the Russians are supported, so the French have lost. The French will be taking a break test with their Lancers. And a 9, I think that's okay. So with the Cavalry, a 9 was 1 full move to its rear, so they have moved back, which is just over the edge of the table. But rather than have them just sort of disappear off, I thought it would be much more interesting for the Dragoons to countercharge and continue the fight, see if the Russians can get some revenge. So it's going to be the same fight again. Because it is the French turn, I'll let them roll first. They are now, however, hitting on 4s. So they fare slightly better with 4 hits this time. The Russians, who did win the combat, will be hitting on 3s. And again, 7 hits for the Russians. So the Russians have 4 saves of a 5. So they are now shaken and won over their stamina. But the French do have to take 7 saves again of a 4. And yeah, that is all fails. So the French are going to get wiped completely. But those Dragoons are now shaken. They will reform, but until they are sort of reined back in, will not be able to take any more part in this battle. But a little bit of Russian revenge on the French. So the Russians reform in there, but now over here, this Russian battalion has to take a break test at -3. That is a 7. -3 takes them down to 4. They are broken and gone, and that commander is in danger of fleeing with them. So, just double check that rule, and in fact, if they are destroyed, then he does go with them, so he goes off. However, I would imagine that the Pavlov Grenadiers have got the wherewithal to be able to sort of pull things together and work themselves. They are, however, isolated. Over here, this brigade is looking a little bit better. The Dragoons are shaken, so they have their Jaegers left. The French are holding on, so let's see what the Russians can do in turn 4. And this is where it all goes horribly wrong. The Russians rolled an 11 for the Pavlov Grenadiers. They were unable to move, unable to do anything. They are just milling around in confusion, wondering where all of their comrades have gone, wondering where their commander has gone. They are trapped at this crossroads, while the French artillery and the Bavarians look fit to move down on them. The commander over here ordered the Jaegers to charge, hoorah, into the French, dispel them from the motherland. But those Jaegers were too smart. They were having none of it. They stayed exactly where they were, again rolling at 11. He then moved over to rally the Dragoons, and instead of rolling an 11, rolled a 12. They blundered and moved 1 full move to their left, which was off the battlefield. So those Dragoons being shaken and now off the battlefield are not coming back. They are gone. And the poor Jaegers at the back are wondering just what is going on in this battlefield. So the only thing to do is this Russian shooting 3 shots into the French, hitting on 4s. There is a disorder. That's not bad. And another hit. So 2 saves in the French on 3s because they are behind the wall. 2 saves, but nonetheless the French are disordered. I don't think the Russians can do much more, but let's give the French turn 5. And in French turn 5, the Bavarians, showing their mettle today, move forward, ready to pour fire into the flank of that Pavlov Grenadier unit, supported by the artillery. Marshal Ney ordering his Voltigeurs and his line infantry to just hold against these Russians. So let's move on to some French shooting. Let's start with the battalion that is disordered. 5 to hit, 3 shots. There's a 6. That is disordered. Those Jaegers, who will take a save on a 4+, and take the save. 2 shots from the Voltigeurs, hitting on 4s with a reroll. 1 reroll. There's another disorder, doesn't matter, and a 4 to save. That's a failure. So 3 wounds now on that unit. Over to the Bavarians. 3 shots. Hitting on 4s. They are in the side flank, so they will reroll misses with enfilade fire, which is just as well. And there is 2 hits on the Pavlovs, who will save on 3s. They save both. Then it is the artillery, hitting on 3s because they are in march column, or attack column. 2 6s. The Pavlovs will save on 6s. They save neither. So 2 casualties and a disorder on the Pavlov Grenadiers. I think the writing is on the wall for the Russians at this stage. Russian turn 5, and spurred on by some sense of trying to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, the Jaegers moved up. The commander attempted to rally on the Jaeger battalion and failed. He should actually be in with them to move him. But the Jaegers did get up there. Pavlovs can't move. They're going to face another round of shooting from the Bavarians and the artillery. Let's see what these Russian Jaegers can do. They have to shoot the nearest target, which is the skirmishers, who are behind the wall. Who are skirmishers? Sorry, but that will be 5s to hit. They do get 1 hit. They get to reroll 1 because they are sharpshooters, even though they're Russian sharpshooters. Still hit. The Voltigeurs will save on a 3 and fail. So the Voltigeurs are now shaken. So that's interesting for them. And then Jaegers, 3 shots. Not clear targets, so hitting on and disordered, so 6s to hit. And miss, but they are sharpshooters. No. So misses there for the Jaegers. I think I did a few mistakes with those earlier where they were hitting on 5s, but target isn't clear being behind the wall. Ho-hum, don't think it matters now at this stage. So that is it for Russian turn 5, French turn 6 coming up. So no movement from the French this turn. They don't need to move anything over here on the left flank of their battlefield. The Bavarians still enfilading, the artillery still firing. Marshal Ney did join the skirmishers, who with their initiative move because of their proximity had to retreat because they were shaken. He has now, however, rallied them into a better condition, and hopefully they might pour some fire on that unit of skirmishers too. So let's start, I suppose, with them. They are within 12, so they will be shooting an unclear target. So it will be 2 shots hitting on 5s. And re-rolling 1 dice because they are skirmish Voltigeurs. So they do hit, and a save of a 4. No, so casualty apiece now in the skirmishers, picking each other off. And now the French battalion will pour 3 shots into the Jaegers. And hit twice, 2 saves, 4, 1 failed. That has shaken them. So that will be another battalion beginning to retreat off the battlefield. And last but most certainly not least, 3 shots, well, not last, but this side of the battlefield, 3 shots from the Bavarians. Reroll and misses because they're enfilading. Every single one of them hit, and another disorder. That's the end of the Pavlovs, I think. 3 saves off a 3. They fail 1, so they're up to 3 casualties. And then the artillery. 3 shots, because they're in column, but no 3s. 2 hits, and again, the 6s are there. 6s to save. Neither. So 5 casualties now on that unit. They are taking a break test at -2. So let's just do that now. And the Pavlovs are gone. So there's now a lot of dead and dying on this side of the battlefield. The Bavarians, their first outing on this channel, have proved their worth, as has the French artillery. And over here, Marshal Ney is in a very strong position. The Russians are going to take one more turn. Let's see if they can do anything. But the battle does belong to the French. Can they do anything with their parting shots? Let's find out. So the Russian general did manage to rally them. So for all the shooting that they're going to do, 3 shots into the French, hitting on 5s with 1 reroll because they're sharpshooters. 1 hit. The French will save it on a 3 because they're behind a wall. They save. Then 2 shots from the Jaegers into the same battalion, hitting on 5s and rerolling 1 because they're sharpshooters. 1 hit, and again the French saving on a 3. The French save, no casualties, and with that the Russians will begin an organised retreat back with their Jaegers, as no doubt Southern German hunting horns sound. Marshal Ney orders the Bavarians to enter into attack column and begin pursuing the retreating Russian Jaegers. So that is it. A very short battle report, but always very engaging, always very fun. Over here was a complete shock that the French just disappeared, and then things looked really well for the Russians, but they just couldn't manage to get their battalions in order. The French artillery proving especially effective today, and the Bavarians earning their place in the Grande Armée. But a very enjoyable battle report for me to play, and I hope it was an enjoyable watch for you. So yeah, there you go. The Russians off to lick their wounds, perhaps to return another day and inflict some revenge upon the French. But yeah, thanks very much for watching, folks, and as always, happy wargaming.